안녕하십니까?
네. 예, 그래서 지금 김준영 교수님께서 다니엘 데이비스 연구원님께 몇 가지 질문을 드리면 다니엘 데이비스 연구원님께서 그에 대한 답을 주실 거고요. 그럼 그 의견에 대해서 또 교수님께서 의견을 주시는 방식으로 대담을 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 대담이 다 끝나면 제가 다시 올라와서 기자분들의 질문을 받도록 그렇게 하겠습니다. 교수님께 마이크를 넘기고 저는 내려가겠습니다.
Sorry about the misunderstanding and some technical issues. Sorry about that. We talked about right before this meeting, this seminar, what do we call? But anyways, presentations. So we decided to do this way because I talked about a lot about this summit yesterday. Dr. Davis will give you like 15 minutes presentation, maybe the continuation of what you did just before, and then I'll talk about my own take without overlapping what he said and without overlapping what I said yesterday. So, and then we're gonna take questions. So why don't you just go ahead? I'm sorry about the inconvenience.
Sorry. So to give you a little bit of background so you understand where I'm coming from as I continue on the conversation here. I've a total of 30 years of total military service, 21 of which was active duty. I've served in South Korea, was an advisor to the 2nd Korean Army in Daegu, and then worked some time also in Seoul in the late 90s. I've had 4 combat deployments in my time. I've had everything from high-intensity tank-on-tank conflict to classic counterinsurgency warfare, and also training foreign militaries. So I've been in Afghanistan twice and Iraq twice over the years. So I've seen up close and personal lots of combat, and I understand what's capable there, and I understand what things you can and cannot do, what war can and cannot solve. And so as that is a backdrop, to continue on with the comments I've made about the perspective. So if the people in Washington, if they thought this through enough, and those that were ready to advocate to solve the North Korea problem with military conflict, in order to do that, you have to believe that if we don't use military force, then at some point Kim Jong-un is going to launch a surprise attack and maybe use nuclear weapons if he gets them, and it could kill hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Some people have actually said that. But the comment is that, well, Kim Il-sung did exactly that in June 1950. Well, look at this 2 situations. It's really important to understand why that happened in 1950. First of all, you were just coming out of the Second World War. You had in the North, Kim Il-sung had quite a bit of combat experience himself. And he had been trained, in the Soviet Union, and many of his officers and men also had lots of combat experience, and they had lots of equipment from the Soviet Union. So they had the T-34 tanks and several other things, which at the time were very modern equipment and among some of the best tanks in the world at that time. In the South Korean side, you had the economy was completely devastated from the Japanese occupation and all the conflict that happened there, all up before and during and after World War II. And the Army was really almost just a skeleton organization. There was conscript, they didn't have experience, they didn't have hardly any kind of modern weapons and arms. And so you could see to where at the time Kim Il-sung could rationally calculate, leaving morality out of it, that maybe he could have a chance to have an unprovoked attack and be able to conquer and own all of the Korean Peninsula. Because the balance of power between North Korea and South Korea at that time was about like this. So if he moved fast, he had a shot. Now, it didn't work out that way for various reasons, but the situation now is so radically changed from that as to not even be in comparison. Because right now, the situation is like 10 times worse than this. Here, you have South Korea with an economy, I believe it's somewhere around 50 times that of North Korea. The South Korean military is well trained, it's well equipped, it's got some of the most modern weapons of war, many of which were indigenously produced, and of course it's got the United States as a military ally. There is no way that Kim Jong-un could ever calculate that if he launched an attack that he could win. That's not even possible, whether it's nuclear or conventional. Now, if you look at that and you look at it from just a rational analysis, of just a military balance of power, then you can say that there is no way that Kim Jong-un would use his weapons in an offensive way. He would use them as a deterrent. because you have to look at things from the other side as well, and many in the United States don't like to do that. And if you do, you see from the Kim's perspective, he's seen what happened to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya after he made a nuclear deal, and then once he didn't have his weapons, then he was knocked out of power and murdered in the streets. Saddam Hussein was, regime change there. He sees what's happened with the situation in Iran right now with the JPCOA. We got rid of that, and now then we're talking bellicose about them again. And so he's got to say, well, what's going to protect me? And right now, I think he's calculated, I think pretty clearly, that having nuclear weapons is going to give him the ability to resist the United States from having regime change in his country. But it's critical to understand that even in that case, they're not for offensive use, because he's very wise and very calculated, and he understands that if he ever uses his nuclear weapons, if he even uses his conventional weapons, the likelihood is very high that he will be destroyed. If he uses nuclear weapons, for sure, he knows that he will be annihilated and wiped out, and he would have to be suicidal to use them in an offensive way. And I don't believe he's suicidal. I believe he's very rational. There's many things he's done with some of these gulags and some of these other ways he's handled even members of his own family that are questionable, and certainly not something that you would want to say is a model of behavior. But he is very rational, and he's not going to do anything that's going to harm his country. And in fact, all of his actions show that he wants to improve his country. He wants to improve his economic outcomes. He wants to be able to have a good, solid country, and he wants to rule for his country for decades, just like his father and grandfather before him. Now, if that be the case, then now that our actions are very different, and the way that we approach this is different, we don't need to look at this that if we don't get CVID, complete verifiable, denuclearization, that should not be the primary objective. The primary objective should be the attainment of peace on the Korean Peninsula. If you attain peace, then possibly down the road, complete nuclear denuclearization becomes a legitimate possibility. Because if Kim Jong-un, if you accept that he has these weapons because he wants to deter the United States, well, if the threat from the United States goes down and down and down over time, then suddenly he doesn't have the need for that. And if he can, develop his country and develop his economy in ways that benefit him and make his regime stable over time, then he doesn't need those weapons. And now then we can actually have that conversation. But that is going to take time. And so specifically about this summit right here, I think that if some of the reports turn out to be accurate, and there is an end of war declaration, if there's an exchange of diplomatic liaison offices, if there's limited sanctions relief from the United States, especially in terms of inter-Korean development with the Kumgang tourist location and the Kaesong industrial complex, those are continuing steps that show that we're willing to do some things, that Kim Jong-un is willing to do some things, and then that lays the foundation for the next level and the next stage. But for those who may be wondering, in the United States, really you can say there's some that they won't be happy no matter what happens. I mean, Kim Jong-un could probably come out and hand over several nuclear weapons and people would still complain about some of that. But I think that in terms of reality, that if we get outcomes like that, that is continuing to move step by step towards peace. And every move that moves away from war, away from confrontation, and towards the establishment of peace on the peninsula, everybody wins on that. Because the fact is that if North Korea is eventually able to rejoin the community of nations, and if their behavior, and they eventually do continue to take those steps towards denuclearization, and their economy prospers, that benefits South Korea, that benefits this entire region, and it even benefits the United States. And so I think that the outcome of this summit right here, if it has those results, that would be really, really good and set the stage for future development of peace. But no matter what, the deterrence that the United States has with our conventional and nuclear weapons will come as close to guaranteeing that Kim Jong-un is never going to launch an offensive war as you can possibly get. And so as long as we don't get impatient and launch an unprovoked military attack for whatever reasons, then there will be peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you very much, Dr. Davis. Actually, you know what? I think I have to play a role of the presider somehow. So I have to confess that I love what you're talking about. You know what? It's so hard for me to find a person like Dr. Davis in America. 90.9% is, as he said, is waiting to, their hunger for criticism against Trump. And he is a retired military person. But even though what he talked about is a very rational, reasonable, but it's almost like a fresh when I listen to what he said. He talked about several important parts. Even right now in America, as he said, Korea's military budget is the same as whole GNP of the North Korea. That amounts to like 40 or 50 times we are richer and stronger than the North Korea. And we have a strongest ally, which is U.S. And in case of something happening in the Korean Peninsula, Japan can be our partner. So that means we have, but even in that consideration, there are some people in the United States still talking about the offensive implication of the North Korean nuclear weapon. Actually, there are people. Why do they have Kim Jong-un? Why Kim Jong-un never give up a weapon? Because he wants to use nuclear weapon to denuclearize. Reunify South Korea militarily or by power or by pressure. Another one he talked about whatever. I think is this summit produced somehow tangible result because already Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un realized that there got to be something out of this summit. They knew that. But whatever it comes out, as he said, even if Kim Jong-un declared to start destroying the nuclear weapon, then still their complaints from Washington is possible. And also he talked about, his point is truly right. Actually, this is, his comment remind me of Johan Galtung, peace theorist Johan Galtung's comment. Peace through security, security through peace is much better than, peace through security. Okay. And you already talked about what's going to happen after this summit. But why? I talked about a little bit about why U.S. almost more than 99% is negative and critical about this.
Yeah, the reason why is there is just too many people in Washington still stuck in a Cold War mentality. Mm-hmm. We are still acting like there's, a them and an us, and we just have not broken out of that yet. And so we're still thinking in those same terms as we did against the Soviet Union in the in the 1990s and 70s, 60s, and all the time before that. And we have to get a new mentality. Mm-hmm. We have to just get rid of that old way of thinking and look at things in a rational, calculating way with the understanding that we want to keep ourselves safe, we want to keep our allies safe, and we want to promote peace everywhere that we can, but we also need to defend and have that deterrent always sitting there, never blinking deterrent. But we need to put a lot more emphasis on diplomacy and a lot less emphasis on the militarized portion of it, because that's the only path that we're going to actually get to where we have peace as a possibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, another reason is I think that because they hate, Trump. So some people are afraid of what if Trump succeed, don't you think?
Right, there are. That's part of the diplomat or the domestic issues in the United States. That there are some that, really, Trump could come back with this with all the nuclear weapons in the truck in the back, and some people would still find some way to say something about it. Who knows what? But that's just part of the way the politics works. I'm sure it's the same in South Korea.
Yeah. several years ago, actually, I wrote a book review on Donald Gregg, a former ambassador to Korea, Donald Gregg's autobiography. And the conclusion actually enlightened me. He said, biggest mistake of U.S. foreign policy is demonize the enemy,
Yes.
so that they cannot rationally think, you know.
I completely get. That's one of the things that I talk a lot about. We need to stop doing that, because the minute that you demonize your opponent, now then you can't make a deal with them, because if you're saying he's the evil, he's the devil, you know, he's this bad thing.
How can you talk to
How
people?
can you then come back and say, oh, but we're going to make a deal with the devil, because you've just told everyone he's all this bad stuff. What you should be able to say is, this is our adversary, this is our competitor. We don't see eye to eye on here, but let's find areas of common purpose. Where are the areas where we do have some agreement? Let's start from there and then work towards the ones we don't have. Now you have a rational basis with which to conduct give and take negotiations that have ultimately a chance to win-win. But that takes a change of mentality.
That's right. That's why still, you know, some suspicions over the intention of the Kim Jong-un. Is it really going to denuclearize, as he said? And I don't think, I think at this point it's useless, because his intention is he can denuclearize on the condition that what he gets. That means he's a rational person. He's not going to denuclearize without anything in return.
Right.
So what we have to do is in a way, he is testing the market, whether he can get better than this holding on to nuclear weapon and living poorly, or he can get better option than this nuclear weapon. So our job is, are we willing to pay the price? Actually, we had the opportunity back in early 90s, but at the time, it could have been much cheaper price we can pay. But at the time, we all thought North Korea was going to collapse, so we didn't do anything then. But now they have a nuclear power, so the cost is much higher. So we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to pay the price? I think, in my opinion, yes, we do. You know, we cannot live in this kind of tense or, you know, at the brink of war. So, of course, we try to, you know, lower the price, but I think we have to agree on that we are willing to pay the price. Then Chairman Kim should not go back to the original position and holding the nuclear power.
And I'll tell you, I think one of the reasons why we have a chance to succeed right now, where we didn't in the 90s, where we didn't even in the early 2000s when there was another opportunity there, is because there is a confluence of events right now that is probably the best there's been in 70 years. And that is the fact that you have President Moon Jae-in, who's doing a phenomenal job of balancing diplomacy with coercion and all the things that are necessary. He's being willing to pay a price to get something. He understands that you have to pay something to get something. You have Kim Jong-un, who is probably more than either of the two predecessors. He is willing to discuss things, and he's willing to not be the hermit kingdom anymore. And you have Donald Trump, because he's the only president in the last 9 presidents we've had, going all the way back to 1953, that's actually willing to talk and to take some chances. And that's one of the most important things to reinforce your point right there. We have to be willing to take some chances to get some peace. And we have to be willing to give something to get something. And I think if we're willing to do that, and it looks now like all 3 parties may be willing to do that, there's a chance to accomplish something that we have not had in decades.
As you made that point, actually, for the past 25 years, we used up all the options, actually, you know, from engagement to pressure. But only one method we never used is top-down. Because this right now is 2 leaders actually carrying this all throughout the process. So maybe this is the best chance we can solve the problem. What do you think?
I think it absolutely is, because that's what it takes is people who are willing to see the possibilities, who want to break with the mentality of the past that's kept us locked into all this, and is willing to make sacrifices and to give and take in order to get there. And I think that I think it's going to take time. I don't think it's going to be fast. I don't think that we're going to come out of this with you know, everything that everybody wants. But you have to build trust among all 3 players in this, and especially among the United States and North Korea. North Korea, Kim Jong-un has to believe that we're going to make a deal and stick by it. We have to believe that they're not going to do something and cheat or try to hide some of their weapons. And that's going to take time. And that's going to take step by step of building confidence along the way. And as long as everybody keeps their nerve and doesn't go back to the old way of thinking, I think we're going to succeed.
Yeah. We all agree that this is big accomplishment, but I cannot, avoid this question actually they raised. So still we need some kind of yardstick. It is whether it's successful or not. So I think it's second meeting itself we can call it success, but still on what point and which level if they agree, then we can call success.
Well, I think you do. You're going to have some kind of outcome of this. The Singapore summit was a success just because it happened. That by itself was a success. And so the communique was very general and sort of aspirational where we want to go. It was important that Kim Jong-un acknowledged that denuclearization was the ultimate objective, and he reiterated just days ago that's still his objective. So that's important. But there has to be something to come out of this. I think that both President Trump and Kim Jong-un, for both domestic reasons, they have to come back with something. I think that if they didn't have, an end of peace negotiations or they didn't establish some of the other things that they need, and it was just another talk, I don't think that many people would be successful, and that'll make it harder for them to get to the next level. So I think that both of them recognize they have to get something. So I think that probably the most likely outcome is an end-to-war declaration, an exchange of diplomatic ties. And I hope also it includes, lessening of sanctions on the inter-Korean development. I think that's so important. Now, home run would be if they came out and they said, we're actually going to have a roadmap, because that's going to be required at some point. You don't have to put a timeline on it, but you do have to say, here's where we're eventually going. This is the direction. And I think that would be a home run. I think that's at least possible. Maybe it's not probable, but that would be a home run if they got it.
Yeah. I think usually in a conventional summit meetings, actually they agree the way before they actually meet. But somehow this Trump and Chairman Kim is different. I think still there is a chance that these two men actually reaches unexpectedly successful deal. I just think hopeful. But the problem is for 8 months it's almost like they didn't meet actually. The Singapore meeting, the mood was so wonderful and historic, but after that somehow just, dwindling, and then we can call it deadlock for 8 months. And recently they started to meet. Actually, Steve Biegun's trip to Pyongyang is almost first working level negotiation. So, and they're still going on now. So a lot to agree. So what if they agree somehow behind the scene, but still cannot put it in a written agreement? Well,
that's, as you point out, that is a possibility. Because when it comes down to it, I think it's probably unique among both President Trump and Kim Jong-un, both of them, that they are the ones that make decisions. And I think that they delegate some level of authority to their lower level negotiators, but I think that, especially in the case of President Trump, he reserves most of that for himself, and he makes a lot of his decisions, whether for good or ill, on a gut instinct and a gut feel. And he has, in several cases internationally, been able to say, in a meeting with some foreign head of state or some other important person, he'll make a decision on the spot that the rest of his staff didn't even know anything about. And so that's entirely possible here too. So really, that's why I say almost anything is possible to come out of here.
I think I have to ask this question because a lot of reporters are wondering today, this morning, this media Vox, I think maybe you're familiar with this, came out that they argued, they maintain that this is like a exclusive report from there. But I'm not really familiar about the media. Time to time they bring surprising news, but they said according to the, U.S. giving up a lot. For example, lifting some sanctions and the exchange, the liaison office, and something like that. But only thing they can get from North Korea is almost like an oral promise to close down the this Yongbyon.
Yeah, and see that article, I've seen that, is a really good example of what I was talking about at the beginning, of this old mentality. Anything that we give on the other side is viewed as this, bad concession, that was, we just gave it away. You're not going to get anything if you don't give something. And these things are really minor, because look, here's what doesn't change. Our nuclear deterrent is not changed. Our conventional military is not changed. All the things that we still have hanging over Kim Jong-un's heads are still there. So we have given nothing away. We don't give anything away, even with some of these exercises, these joint exercises with South Korea, which we've temporarily suspended. We don't give away any capabilities with that. But if those are steps that actually help us get to the point to where Kim Jong-un has the confidence to give something major, like maybe the complete getting rid of Yongbyon, or providing an outline of how many weapons he has and all that kind of thing. Those things, you're not going to get there if you don't give something in return. And these are pretty minor things. And so I think that people who say that don't understand how diplomacy works, just to be blunt, because you can't expect someone to give all of those things if you won't give even minor things like what's in that article.
For me, in my opinion, this second summit is like an exchange between the Yongbyon and the East sanctions. But according to the Vox, actually, as you said, it's a very modest, in a way different from CNN or New York Times. If they're right, actually U.S. is giving up a lot. But somehow, are you saying that because they're worried so much, so this is like a preventive kind of release, that they're worried about Trump is cheated again and then giving a lot?
I mean, honestly, I don't understand what they think should happen here. I mean, what would President Trump be able to give that they wouldn't shoot down like that, or that they wouldn't say was given away? Because look, you cannot get something without giving something. Exactly. And Kim Jong-un has given stuff. To say that it's meaningless that he hasn't conducted any missile tests, nuclear tests, those are big deals, because you can't project or perfect your missile technology unless you conduct physical tests. That has been a big problem for them right now in their development. So the fact that they haven't done it, that's a big concession. But for whatever reason, people don't give any acknowledgement for that. They just want to, blame Trump for having given away other things.
Yeah, you have a great point, because the word for word or action for action actually originated by North Korea. But at this time, they unilaterally concede several things: moratorium, 동창리, 풍계리, without anything in return. They got that cancellation of military exercise, but that anytime they can be resumed.
Yes.
So that's another issue. That's why at the first meeting, they want to have at least this declaration of ending war as a trust, as a signal, as a token of trust. And the second summit, they're trying to get this somehow partial, at least the partial ease of sanction, again, it's a token for trust and a new relationship between two countries.
Well, see, and I think it's more than just a token. I think that an end of war declaration, I mean, that doesn't give anything. It just acknowledges what we already know. There's no war, so we're just acknowledging what already exists. And to anything that's going to facilitate inter-Korean economic development, where you guys get tied in together, that every bit of that lowers the chances that anything will ever go backwards to confrontation, because both sides benefit from it. And so I think that's a positive thing. It's not something that's been given away. That's something that moves us towards peace.
I think before I go to the floors, the last question the organizer gave me is, which point do you think Hanoi Summit holds the most significant compared to Singapore Summit? And what to watch for the Trump-Kim Summit in Hanoi, especially tonight, dinner first, and before that, the one-to-one meeting is called social dinner, and social talk and social dinner.
Yeah, I just think that if we get these things that we're talking about, an end of war declaration and the lessening of sanctions and the exchanging of diplomatic offices, I think all those would be great. And then there was probably some good photo ops between the two, showing a continued trust and building that confidence. and all of that is necessary to move to whatever the next stage is. You know, the next one is probably going to be, you know, the next historic move, which is Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in meeting in Seoul. That's never happened before, and that's another major, you know, it's another major step. And then every step you want to keep building and moving closer and closer so that, you know, peace becomes, momentum becomes irreversible. And that's why I think that the end of peace or end of war declaration is more important than some say, because that helps to change the mentality. And if you say that we're moving towards peace and we're ending the war, that makes it less likely that you're going to go back, and it makes it harder. So I think that's a very positive thing.
Do you think this dinner, they can try to, you know, each other, they want to taste or try to find out what's the intention behind?
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure there'll be a lot of that going on, yeah.
Okay. I think we have to think about this summit as a continuation of the first one. So first one is like a very short meeting, 1 day working meeting without, you know, dinner or anything, any other procedures. So this is like we have to put together. So ending there. So first one is they declare the big pictures. Actually, big deal is a, you know, first meeting. Now, in a way, it's a filling up to realize this big thing. So I think it's good. The good way of starting is having dinner with, you know, to each other. Yeah. Now, why don't we start a Q&A session? Yeah. If you raise hand.
예, 그러면 질문 있으신 기자분들께서는 손을 들어주시면 저희가 마이크 안내해드리겠습니다.
Okay, thank you. I'm a journalist from Caixin Media, Chinese media. My question is, I noticed that South Korean President Moon Jae-in has said before the summit that South Korea will take the lead in preparing for a new Korean Peninsula regime by standing at the center rather than the periphery of history. So this new Korean Peninsula regime, what does it mean? What does it refer to? Is it a peace regime that we talked about before involving all the four parties of the Korean War, or is it just a new regime that between the North and South Korea? Thank you.
I think he's going to unfold details, but I'm not sure yet what he meant. But, you know, I actually helped him to be elected. Did my help really work? But I don't know. But his mission, he has a mission mind, sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula. His final goal. And he tried to, actually denuclearization is important and is a gateway to peace on the Korean Peninsula. I think he was talking about the beyond the denuclearization. So if the denuclearization, of course, is a must, but after that, we are not going to be passed by other people because we have our own destiny. This is Korean Peninsula. So it's our autonomy or our work and our duty to do that. But details, I don't know yet. But you know, if this denuclearization actually happened and inter-Korean relationship improved, that has a really big strategic impact on the Korean Peninsula and the beyond. So I think it's another tectonic change we are going to witness.
Somebody in the back there.
질문 있으시면 손 들어주십시오.
Hi, I was wondering if either one of you are worried about what the two leaders might talk about privately without anyone else around.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that, concern about that in U.S. press here recently because of some concerns about what President Trump and Putin may have said off camera and, you know, without some advisors around. But you know, when you look back through historic times, in U.S. diplomatic history especially, Even during the time, I've actually spoken with one of our diplomats who was involved with the 1972 opening of the United States and China with part of the Nixon administration, and I'm told that there was many conversations that they had, you know, away from cameras, away from staff members, you know, private one-on-one. I think those things are necessary. I personally don't find it nefarious because, especially President Trump, the way he does business he likes to develop a relationship with the person he's talking to, and I think that he can come to a negotiated deal. I think he's just more comfortable with doing it that way. So what really matters is what the United States agrees to and what the country is obligated to, and those things will be done in the open. So what happens behind the scenes is not anything that the country is going to be obligated to. So that's what's the most important.
Because they're worried about, because they evaluate, the first one is, you know, North Korea, you know, Kim Jong-un got a lot, but Trump is fooled by Kim Jong-un. And actually, Kim Jong-un's perspective, he did consider a lot. And he, behind the scene, he got the promise that something like denuclearization, declaration of ending war, and liaison office, actually, he was willing to give. He thought Dongchangni, destruction of Dongchangni is enough and is good accomplishment to give away. But that was not the response he got when he returned. So from Kim Jong-un's perspective, he is actually American side, Trump broke the promise. So maybe Kim Jong-un asking that, why didn't you keep the promise? I don't know, but that's another possibility.
예, 또 질문해 주시면 됩니다. 그 한국 기자분들께서도 한국어로 질문해 주셔도 다 통역이 되니까요. 부담 갖지 마시고 많이 질문 부탁드립니다.
Hi, I'm a reporter from China, the paper. So my question is, when it comes to, I mean, before the summit began, a lot of media talk about the Vietnam model. So, is the United States really want the relation between Dprk and the United States to become like the relation between Vietnam and the United States? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
The Vietnam model for North Korea. And
well,
the relationship between Vietnam and U.S.
Well, I certainly hope that's the case. That's one of the things that is just really, I think, on vivid display here when you see the fact that we're meeting here in Vietnam, which was bitter rivals and bitter large-scale conflict and fighting, and now then we're doing business and they're hosting us here, and I've been treated very nicely by all the Vietnamese officials I've had interaction with, and that same capability is absolutely possible in the future is for North Korea and the United States. And look, I mean, there's so many. I've met so many great South Korean people, and ultimately they're the same people, right? So the same friendship that I think that we have with South Korea, over time, I think that is possible with the United States and North Korea as well. And you know, and maybe one day, you know, you guys achieve reunification as both sides seem to want to have, and one day they'll just be the Korean nation. And I think that there's every reason to believe that in the future, the Korean nation could be very friendly and open with the United States. This has happened here in Vietnam.
I think Vietnam is a really unique case. Actually, not only U.S., but also North Korea and South Korea. Actually, from all perspective, this is great opportunity, a great model case. From North Korean perspective, actually they had a fault, and now they had a good relationship that actually North Korea always wanted. And actually even socialist country actually won the war. That's what North Korea thinks. And from, as he said, from US, American perspective, this is the case from enemy to strategic partners right now. And another, and South Korea too, as he said, is the ever improving relations between the two countries. So now, like South Korea, North Korea, and Vietnam, actually, we can have a trilateral partnership too. And beyond that, why then Trump continued to emphasize? Because I think this is anti-dote or anti-example of a Libyan case. You know, many conservative and hardline try to, or North Koreans are worried about they're the second Libya. But what Trump is emphasizing is you will not be Libya, you will be Vietnam. So that's I think his point, and it is significant.
예, 또 다음 질문 부탁드립니다. 질문하실 때 본인의 이름과 소속을 밝혀주시면 감사하겠습니다. 다시 한번 손 들어주시겠어요? 네.
I'm a journalist from China. My question is, in the first stage of denuclearization, what North Korea's action could be accepted by United States to release some sanctions?
For a second, coming second. This summit, right?
I'm sorry. In the first stage of denuclearization,
okay.
what actions of North Korea could accepted by United States to relieve some sanctions?
I think it's because already Kim Jong-un promised to bring U.S. inspection team to Dongcheon and Punggye-ri. I think it will be implemented right away. But the Yongbyon plus Alpha, that and actually Steve Biegun talked about that. So I'm not sure what level they are going to reach the agreement. But somehow Yongbyon is the partial or total, or Yongbyon plus Alpha, that actually if North Korea is willing to give, and with some plan, as he said, like a roadmap, then there's, U.S. has to give something in return regarding sanction lift. You want to add something?
No, I was just going to say, in the early part of this, there were a lot of voices in Washington that were saying, we're not going to give anything. We're not going to relieve any sanctions until complete denuclearization. And I think enough people finally came to their senses to realize that that's very unrealistic, and we would certainly never do that if we were negotiating with any partner on the other side. We have to give everything away before we get anything back. And so I think that now you've seen President Trump has been softening that and moving back from it and saying, we will consider limited sanctions relief for some kind of concrete steps, and those probably are some good ones.
And because it's very complicated and very complex issues, so if they don't agree, or if they cannot agree, but somehow they exchange some oral promise, then there's high possibility then, because there's a time limit, there's high chance they can agree on launching of the working group. And what's the difference? And the criticism will be, what's the difference between this and the 2005 six-party talks, joint communique, or February 13 agreement? But maybe they can say this like this: working group supervised directly by leaders. So that means working group going on launching, and on the other side, third and fourth summit. So it's going together. That's my bet, actually.
예, 또 질문 있으시면 손 들어주십시오.
Hi, thank you for your brilliant discussion. I'm from Xinhua News. Daniel, you just mentioned one of the focus of Dprk is economic development. So what if there is no mention, there is no consensus reached by the two sides on lifting certain sanctions? Could this meeting be kind of like a tipping point?
I don't think that it would be a tipping point. I don't think this is going to be a tipping point in either direction. I think this is just going to be another step along the way. And I think it's very clear, Kim Jong-un has made no secret of the fact that that's his desire. He said it in domestic messages. He said it in international settings. and we understand that, and I think that enough people in the United States at the senior level understand that's also in our benefit to see that developed, because the more you're doing that, then the less you're thinking about making bombs and missiles and all that other kind of thing. But in the event that it doesn't, they can't come to an agreement the way that we want to now, I think it would be a setback, but only a setback, and something that would have to be addressed in the next round, whether that was the Moon-Kim next round or at a future summit or even a working level thing. So I think it's something we need to get to, and I hope that they do. But I don't think it would be catastrophic if it doesn't work out today.
There's common saying that there's no possibility of a failed summit whenever they decided it got to be success, and both leaders will declare success even if they couldn't reach focal point. You have a follow-up question?
Yeah. Early in Trump presidency, one of his major foreign policy idea is peace through strength, and Mr. Trump is famous for not for win-win cooperation, but for zero-sum in bilateral negotiations. How these two factors fit into the current negotiation between the two sides? Thank you.
Well, if there's one thing that has been that we could say conclusively about Trump through the first 2 years of his administration is that he's very unpredictable, and in some ways he is a zero-sum. It's got to be my way or the highway. It's kind of a situation here, and certainly you look at the way that he's dealing with the Iranian situation right now. There's very little even consideration of giving anything in that regard here. But when he perceives that he can make a deal here, he's willing to do anything that it takes. You've seen that. He talked about that a lot actually in his book, The Art of the Deal. You've seen it in his past, in his business dealings. And in the first 2 years of administration, he has shown that he is willing to throw the rule book out the window. However it's been done in the past, it doesn't matter. However he may have done it in the past, it doesn't matter. If he thinks that a hard line is what's going to work here, then that's what he's going to do. And if he thinks that saying nice things about Chairman Kim Jong-un is going to work, then that's the way he's going to go with that too. So I think the bottom line is Trump will do whatever he thinks is going to give him the best chance to succeed. And right now, he seems to be on a cooperative level with Kim Jong-un, and I hope that continues on.
Trump behavior is, we call it predictive unpredictability. So today, remember, he also, this morning, he tweeted it, criticized Democrats, stop talking about how I deal with North Korea. And if you know that well, why didn't you do that during the 8 years of Obama administration? That's one rule he's abide by. So this is competition going on between Obama regime and his regime. So, and luckily for South Korea, because Obama didn't do anything about North Korea, this is the area Trump can excel and can declare win over Obama administration. I think it does. It's going on.
예, 또 손 들어주시면 저희가 가겠습니다. 더 질문 없으신가요? 예.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'm also with Shina News Agency, and I wanted to ask, what do you expect could be the most likely give and take between Kim Trump in the second summit? What I mean is that what can we expect the most likely sanctions relief from the U.S. side, and how much possibility do you have for Trump to allow to Korea to the restart inter-Korean economic products as sanctions relief? Thank you.
My personal opinion is that the most likely is inter-Korean issues with the Mount Kumgang tourist area and the Kaesong industrial zone, because I think those are easiest to do. I think those are unilateral sanctions right now. The larger ones that were UN Security Council resolutions, those are more difficult to get because you have to have consensus. You can't just unilaterally say that, and it'd be involved with a lot of other Security Council members as well. So I think that the first ones you'd see are things that Trump can just do unilaterally because they were imposed unilaterally.
Regarding sanctions, if there are several ways, like a suspension or a termination or exemptions, I think exemption is the easiest way. So without touching the whole sanction system, actually, you know, we cannot slice the sanctions. So U.S. is really afraid of, you know, doing something about the whole sanction system. But we have an experience like a Pyeongchang Olympic, or you know, special issue area or region, so we can, Trump can give them like exemptions.
Yeah.
So easiest way is regarding, well, let's say, I think Kumgang Mountain is much easier because tourism itself is not, you know, a violation of the sanction. And Kaesong little, you know, sensitive because so many things involved, but possibility, but less possibility than Kumgang. But what if North Korea give a lot, then Kaesong could be included too.
예, 또 질문 있으시면 손 들어 주십시오.
Hi, I'm a reporter from Singapore newspaper, The Straits Times. My question is, okay, President Trump met with Vietnamese leadership and he signed a bunch of deals before he's going to meet with Chairman Kim, whereas Chairman Kim is staying in his hotel and, you know, there's no movement since. So what do you think is the message that they are trying to send to each other with the activities before dinner? And this dinner being their first, right? How do you think the dinner might turn out?
Yeah, I think it's certainly from President Trump's position, I think it's very clear what message he wants to send, which is this could be you. This is what the possibilities are for your country. We could sign these kinds of deals with your country, and you could really, you know, benefit from that long term. And he's not shied away at all from saying that Kim Jong-un has an enormous opportunity to develop economically, and both in bilateral with the United States and multilateral with other countries here. And I think that was entirely designed to show that, look, we used to be, you know, mortal enemies and fighting a bitter war, but now look, we're having these economic deals, and that can be your future as well. And in terms of the dinner, I think that the most likely outcome is it's going to be a very positive, you know, situation where they're going to be showing very cordial. I think that the message that they want to show there is that, hey, we can work this out. You know, that we're not, you know, hating each other, and we can work together and be civil here, and we can continue to carry that into negotiations. That's what I expect.
Okay, I don't have anything to add. The next question.
예, 다음 질문 있으십니까? 더 질문 없으시면 이만 마무리하도록.
I have last questions for you. Right before I came here, I met Gary Seymour, Mr. Gary Seymour. He said very interesting thing. As you say, whatever happens, and there are complaints all over America, especially among experts and among congressmen. But he said he's usually critical and about Trump policy toward North Korea. But he said, whatever happens and whatever criticism among elites, actually more important thing is public people's mind. Actually, at least if they are out of North Korean threat, then that's rewarding. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I could not more strongly agree with that. Because we have to ask, these critics have to ask themselves, and we all have to ask ourselves, what would you rather have? Would you rather have 2017 to where there was threats of fire and fury and turn Seoul into a sea of fire? Or would you rather have a situation where we're talking about, you know, how much are you going to give away and how far, you know, how much are you going to move towards peace, and how much sanctions might be relieved? Things that are always moving towards peace. And I think that if we get this change of mentality, that we're no longer going to be looking for a zero-sum, I want to, you know, hurt the other side and I want to get everything, but we're willing to take step by step, you know, to work towards something that's to everybody's advantage, both economically as well as national security, then we're going to be able to change mentalities. And once you change that you're not in a, you know, a combative Cold War mentality, but now that you're like, we're just going to take rational action here, then good things are going to be possible. The only issue, it's going to take time. This will not happen, you know, on one summit. It won't happen in the next summit. But we keep taking these steps. Just as we take step by step with reciprocal moves, we also take, all of us together, we take step by step towards peace and further away from conflict. And that's the way we get to a good situation where everybody's at peace.
Thank you very much.
예, 감사합니다. 그러면 이것으로 이번 대담은 마치도록 하겠습니다. 저희 초청에 미국에서부터 멀리서 와주신 우리 데이비스 연구원님께 특별히 감사드리고요. 또 진행 역할까지 맡아서 유익한 대담 이끌어주신 김준영 교수님께도 특별히 감사드립니다. 두 분은 내일 저희 북미 정상회담 성과를 평가하는 포럼에 다시 한번 또 초청드리도록 하겠습니다. 4시 30분부터는 다음 백학순 세종연구소장님과 고유한 동국대 교수님의 대담이 이어질 예정이고요. 또 하루 종일 저희 전문가들께서 인터뷰에 응하실 거니까 저희 인터뷰가 필요하신 분들은 안내데스크에 신청해 주시면 되겠습니다. 감사합니다. 이것으로 마치겠습니다.
Thank you very much.